So we are here to respond to this video by the new Polity called "Is Bitcoin a Good Coin?" where the new Polity guys ultimately conclude that it's not. And so that's why we are here today on the podcast. I'm here with Father Nick Blaha over here in Kansas City, Kansas. And I'm here with Slappy Jones II, the pseudonymous Slappy Jones II, who is the co-host of the Rollo and Slappy show. Man, how are you?
Great. Great to see you, Andy.
Doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining me here on the podcast. So we're going to respond to this video. Father Blaha, just first impressions. What is your overall impression of this critique of Bitcoin by these, I think, meta-faith that are critiquing Bitcoin?
Well, at first, I'm very sympathetic to it because they're coming at our social order with a Catholic worldview. But the more and more I listened, I began to scratch my head a little bit, and I really wanted to learn more about why they were critiquing the things that they were, because I felt like there were some misunderstandings there. So I think we can we can tackle those today for sure. But yeah, some of the seems like easy objections that we could address and clear.
Yeah, I think we're on the same team because we all want to integrate the faith into our lives, and we don't want to make just our Catholic faith the thing that we do on Sundays, and it has no bearing on anything else that we do. I like that, but I think they're wrong. And so Slappy, your initial impression, your initial thought.
Well, my initial thoughts were have fun staying poor, but like you said, no, they're fellow Catholics, and we have this similar worldview, and we want the similar end result. And one thing that I've found that Bitcoin has done for me is it lowers your time preference, and it makes you think long-term, and it makes you think about the community you want. And I probably want people like them in my community. I want Catholic.
Yeah.
I want to build a long Catholic community. I want to be a part of that. And, in our fiat world where it's just Sunday Mass and you can rely on a check from the person who it kind of strips that out. And so I think they are sincere in their criticisms. I think they see problems with, I would say with Bitcoin, but I think just money generally. I mean, any money can be an idol. And so, of course, I think they're wrong. And I hope that they adopt Bitcoin because we need Catholics to be holding Bitcoin now before it becomes world currency. So those are my initial thoughts, and I think we should get into some of their objections.
Yeah.
As well.
So good. So I listed a few things, and I would certainly encourage everyone to watch the video and read their article, which is the clickbait title is Crypto Idolatry, the Theology of Bitcoin. So that's kind of interesting. But first, the first critique is Bitcoin is not a commodity. And that's a critique of Bitcoin because they're saying that unlike something like gold, Bitcoin is not a physical good. So, Father, thoughts on that critique?
Well, the critique of fiat money, which the banking system right now is precisely that there's a currency which is different than money. Its value is based on its exchange, its travel, how much it moves, rather than what it is in and of itself. And that was created because that aided the growth of the economy. Not having to carry around a physical commodity is the whole reason we came up with these paper notes, to aid the exchange, right? I don't want to have to give gold coins to someone or carry around a big purse to have my money on hand. So the change from physical commodities to paper money was a technological innovation that helped money do its job. And I would say the move from paper money to a digitally scarce currency is just the next step in that process. The difference being, of course, that the value of that currency of Bitcoin can't be manipulated by any one authority to their advantage. So that critique is something we are most proud of as Bitcoiners.
Yeah, well said. I mean, we can affirm the fact that there are some advantages to fiat. I don't have to walk around with my life savings in a pouch on my belt, which would require me to have to, defend myself from burglary and have to secure my gold coins on a constant basis. or if I wanted to transmit that wealth somewhere, I have to buy insurance to put it on a ship. And so if the ship sinks, I have to have insurance for that. No, there are advantages to the fact that digital money does not require you to have gold coins on your person and can help you to transmit that wealth over many, many, many times. So I think we can affirm the technology there, but Bitcoin takes it one step further, and it doesn't allow inflation. So it doesn't allow the creator of that fiat currency to create as much inflation as they would like. What do you think, Slap?
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it. One thing I think is interesting is they kind of said, yeah, it's just an abstract accounting concept, but really that's all money is. Any money, gold money. Yeah. It's just who owns what and how. And, while there might not be a ledger, a decentralized ledger, that's what it is. There's only so much gold and certain people have it. It's a ledger. And gold's value, because I'm going at gold because I don't think these guys are in favor of the fiat currency we have. They were certainly critical of it. Right. But what about gold? What is gold backed by? Is it backed by its industrial use? There's a monetary premium on gold. And I don't know how much that is, but most people aren't using gold for their fillings because there's other metals to use or other resources to use. Gold's expensive. If gold wasn't used as money, I don't know what percent is that monetary premium. Maybe it's 90%.
It's about 70%.
70%? Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes gold a lot cheaper. Maybe we'd be using gold for our fillings. So if you're saying that the price of gold is good because if we didn't use it as a store of value, it would be worth 30% of what it is, where does that additional value come from? That's the monetary value of gold, the monetary premium that's on top of it. And it's the same with Bitcoin, except Bitcoin is pure money. There's no other use for it other than money. And so it's kind of an all or nothing game. We either get Bitcoin or Bitcoin fouls. And it's the hardest, most secure way to transfer wealth. Like you were saying, think about how expensive it would be for me to send you any amount of money in gold from Pennsylvania to Kansas. The security, the insurance, the transportation, and you can literally send $1 billion to Australia and confirmed in 10 minutes for very inexpensively on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that is powerful. And you think about remittance. I don't want to go off on too many tangents here, but if you're talking about helping the poor, the government takes money out of those remittance payments back to Cuba, back to the third world. Bitcoin, they don't, and it's there, and no one has to give you permission, and no one can stop you from doing it. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, well said. And gold has a price in fiat dollars that the market has decided on. So over centuries and actually millennia, the market has looked at the properties of gold and say, well, those are pretty good monetary properties. And ultimately, they've settled on a market price for that. And so, yeah, to your point, people save in gold, so there's a monetary premium for it. And the value of the gold has been decided by the market. And so I wonder if they would be skeptical about that market price, in the case of Bitcoin. Okay, so I think we nailed that one, guys. Good work on that. Point number 2.
I guess that's probably up to them to decide.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a slam dunk, but we're going to keep working on it. The other thing that they talked about, which bothers me too, but we should address this, is there are some Bitcoin advocates that are using religious language. So things like they're calling Bitcoin the Reformation, which of course makes us Catholics queasy. And I would refute that, but we can get into it. I guess there's been like Bitcoin baptisms and then some sort of Satoshi services that people are having on Sundays as opposed to like going to Holy Mass. So your thoughts, is Bitcoin a religion and are we all heretics?
Well, I don't know, Slappy, what your thoughts are, but that was probably the strangest objection of the ones that were brought up, just because, man, we live in an insane world, and the stuff that people get excited about is constantly surprising me. Hey, go to a football game and watch people make hits of themselves in at the backside of the end zone. The fact that someone takes something and elevates it into a religion, even though it's not capable of bearing that level of meaning, doesn't invalidate the basic value of what it is that's being dealt with. Those things bother me only because I feel sorry for the people that think of it that way, not because I think it somehow invalidates the nature of what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, there's any number of, niches on the internet that all of us could get fired up about. So, like, I imagine the New Polity Institute, they might be really interested in like the localism movement or something about that. And there are probably plenty of localists here in Kansas City that like think that's their thing, like that's their salvation, that's their kind of way out of the noise and the madness. And maybe they, in some sense, they're treating it as a religion, but that's true for anything. That's true for anything here. And so, yeah, I think we always need to recognize who we serve, but I don't think Bitcoin is an idol.
Got me going a little bit because this is such a cheap shot, and I don't know. I don't know if you've ever heard from our Protestant friends something like, "You Catholics just worship the saints." Like, stay away from the Catholic Church. They worship saints. Or, there's a scandal in the Catholic Church. Therefore, Catholicism is invalid. Even though the faith was here before all of us and will be here after us, and we're all human beings. And the faith has nothing to do with those scandals. And, you could pick out, like you said, go to a football game or look on anything. Look anywhere. Like, to your point, Andy, I mean, there's crazies everywhere. And in newsflash, we don't exactly have a Catholic culture. So there's going to be some people who aren't Catholic who are getting into Bitcoin, who aren't religious, who, governments are going to adopt it. I mean, everyone is. You can't censor it. So everyone's coming in, and it matters what the protocol is. And Bitcoin doesn't change, and how can we use it to benefit society? So just because there's some heretical actions in the Bitcoin world doesn't invalidate Bitcoin.
What I'm hearing the Holy Priest say and Slappy is that neither one of you are doing Bitcoin baptisms or going to Satoshi services on Sunday. Is that fair to say?
I do have a leap of joy every time I orange pill someone. I will say that. It's pretty fun. It's pretty consoling to use some Ignatian spirituality language, but probably on that deep level. But
I would just say if you own Bitcoin, you are naturally kind of optimistic. And you're naturally kind of bullish, and sometimes that can come off as a little bit cringe, right? Like if you're seeing the clips at Bitcoin Miami or something, you think, some of that's kind of cringe. But like you're an optimist. Like sometimes, like as an investor, like if you're really interested in gold, for example, you're probably a curmudgeon. You're probably kind of hoping to see the world end because that's the only way that gold really could potentially ever become money again. Whereas like with Bitcoin, like you kind of understand a lot of those arguments, but you're more of an optimist because it's technology that's making things better. And I think sometimes at the extreme that can come off as kind of cringe. Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Absolutely.
So now we get into the meat of their critique, and they really have a lot of, I think this is maybe their biggest issue. It's the issue with the Bitcoin billionaires. So these early adopters of Bitcoin that have held their Bitcoin. So they mentioned Satoshi. I think they mentioned the twins as well too. And because they're early adopters of this network and have not sold their Bitcoin, they're worth billions now. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. What are your thoughts on that critique? Is there a problem that there are Bitcoin billionaires? It seems to me like it's more, they're kind of coming from the angle of like, well, that's not a fair distribution of this money. So that's something we should be critical. What are your thoughts, man?
Slappy, I'll defer to you for the first step.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that speculation does good for society. If no one was buying Bitcoin early on, we wouldn't be where we are now. Those people delayed their consumption. They earned US dollars or whatever currency they work in, saw what Bitcoin was, saw a future for it, talked about it, invested in it, and now they're reaping the rewards of that. And what they're doing is bringing sound, hard currency so that you can store your energy over time more efficiently to everybody. And the things I mentioned earlier, the remittances to third world countries is not possible without these early adopters. And you will find there's a lot of stories when Bitcoin had its first run up to over $1,000, when it went to $1, that was big news. When it went to $100, that was big news. You had people holding through all that. Went over $1,000 and it crashed all the way back down in the 200s. But there was a lot of people who sold their Bitcoin and bought Lamborghinis and, were out partying on yachts and then realized they don't have any more Bitcoin, and it lowers their time preference. And so to those people who did sell, they didn't see the future. They sold their Bitcoin to stronger hands, potentially, who did see, and they got demoted for their bad decision in selling their Bitcoin and taking a quick thrill. And the people who hold long-term can see what Bitcoin's value is and what the future is, or what they think the future is, and where capital will flow into the harder asset. And they should be rewarded for that. So that's one critique of it from one angle. And I don't know if that is exactly what you brought up or not, or where I just fit what I wanted to say into that question. So I got off track there, but Father, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and I just to add to that, they could have been wrong, right? They could have been investing in, hash cash or, whatever earlier versions of Bitcoin came out in the 90s and the early 2000s, or like, some other altcoin. They could have gone that route, and they could have been wrong, right? And so that's like, these men just happened to speculate correctly in that case. And like you said, to their credit, they were able to have the resilience and the patience to hold. But I do wonder, I wonder if the new Polity Institute is also just kind of skeptical of savings in general, where I don't know if they like the idea of someone holding a significant amount of savings. It almost seemed like they kind of were saying the Bitcoin billionaires should have essentially donated their profits, essentially, because that would have been the more just distribution, if you will.
Well, yeah. So that is something that a moral perspective would bring, but it's not in itself a critique of the currency. I think we have to say, first of all, that we're still in the early stages of Bitcoin. First of all, this is still early adoption, right? Everybody that gets into Bitcoin at this point is still, relatively speaking, an early adopter. The percentage of people in the world who potentially could use Bitcoin, have a Bitcoin wallet, have access to the Bitcoin network is something like 96, 98% of the global population, right? So in terms of Bitcoin's life, we still have nowhere to go but up. And so, yes, at this point, there is a concentration of wealth. To what extent that concentration is a false data point, because every time I put my money on an exchange, my money is going into a centralized wallet that now shows up as holding billions and billions of dollars worth of crypto. Well, it's my crypto, but it's being recorded as belonging to a particular entity that's not me. So to some extent, that data is inaccurate. Sure, Satoshi has his 5 million coins. That does kind of bother me. I sort of wonder, what would happen if Satoshi came back and started throwing his weight around? I don't know. That's a genuine question that I have, but I don't think in principle it's wrong. And as we adopt Bitcoin, this is going to work out not just to the advantage of the early adopters who currently have a ton of money or a ton of Bitcoin, but everyone else who's brought into the network, because it isn't just a commodity, it is a network, right? And those who invested in that network early on took a risk, and they have a right to be compensated for that.
Yeah, and to the point about Satoshi, if Satoshi is dead, which a lot of people think he is, it's a moot point. And so,
right,
actually, Satoshi did a good thing by essentially decreasing the float. By if his coins are gone forever, which some people think that they are. I do think their critique has merit when it comes to altcoins. So, for example, if you have a promoter that wants to create the next crypto, and he's doing a pre-mine, and then he's going to go on a marketing tour to try to pump this thing up so that his crypto is worth more, it has merit. But the miracle of Bitcoin, and miracle in air quotes, is that didn't happen. The early adopters just bought it like everyone else, and they happened to buy it earlier than we did. And so I think it was a more just way, a more just free market way of doing it, as opposed to like, the Ethereums or wherever, where there's a pre-mine and the essentially the founders do get rich if they market it correctly.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, the altcoins all have a CEO essentially marketing them and pumping them, and you can see when the owners sell their coins. And like with Satoshi, if he is still alive, he has the strongest diamond hands that exist. I mean, having Bitcoin from literally the Genesis block and never moving it, where we are now, I mean, I don't know. There's too many humans who could do that, So who knows? Who knows if he's still here or not? But I kind of don't think he is.
Yeah, but we are talking about Satoshi, who is a pseudonymous person. Nobody knows who he is. We're talking about like the Winklevoss twins, who I can't imagine are like, on the top 10 or 20 list of the richest men in the world. So like they're criticizing some pretty small players in the grand scheme of things. We're not talking about Jamie Dimon. We're not talking about BlackRock. We're talking about a very niche number of people that got wealthy doing something that, it is to me like not an ethical dilemma at all compared to some of these other people who made fiat, billions in maybe more nefarious ways.
Okay, let me just one point, equality, equitable distribution is of course something that we want, but it's not always something that we can write into the system. So economically, inequality isn't always bad. And if it means, for instance, we have a situation where the wealthy have a certain amount of wealth and the poor have a lower amount of wealth, it would stand to reason that if we could increase the amount of wealth that the poor have, even though create a situation where those who are wealthy would make even more, that would seem to be a desirable thing because it happens to bring a great number of people out of dependence, out of poverty, out of living hand to mouth. We can look at that and say morally that's not in principle always and everywhere immoral.
And these billionaires have got an obligation to be good stewards of their wealth. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But that's on them. That's on them to make those decisions the way that God intends them to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a critique of the entire system. And I was a little like, when they're saying like, the billionaires have like proselytized this to the El Salvadorans, and, they're trying to pump this in third world countries so that they can get more wealthy. And these dumb El Salvadorans don't know what they're doing. Like, I didn't love that characterization either, because like, if you look at what President Bukele has been talking about, like, he gets it. I don't think he's a perfect man, but like, it's not like he's some dummy that's just been, sold a bag of goods by these billionaires, Slappy.
Yeah, I mean, and time will tell, I guess. But I don't see how it's bad, since Bitcoin's protocol cannot be manipulated. I don't see how it's bad news that a government is adopting Bitcoin. And you can look at Bitcoin Beach down in El Salvador.
What is bad is that, sorry to interrupt, but El Salvador was on the dollar, which is maybe better than other options. But like, with the dollar standard that they're on, we're essentially exporting our inflation to them. So we like inflation here in the U.S. because that gives me and my family stimulus checks, and that gives us, the ability to bomb countries and to build highways everywhere. But El Salvador doesn't benefit from that. They benefit from the fact that it's more or less a stable currency, but like, they don't benefit from that inflation in the same way that we do here in the United States of America. So they didn't mention that, and I think that's worth pointing out if you're talking about El Salvador.
Very good point.
All right, so they announced. Okay, so they talked about the billionaires. They talked about how it's only a small number of entities and people that own the Bitcoin. I'll just say that, like, from my own experience, the people that I know that got into Bitcoin are not the wealthy bankers or the elites. It's the opposite. It's like the weird kid I went to high school with, my nerdy cousin, or like my kind of crazy anarchist friends. It's kind of come from the ground up. And so, like, I don't know, like maybe it's true that like there's still a little bit of concentration, but like in general, like it has not come from the top. It's come from the bottom up in my view.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's anecdotal, but yeah, I can't emphasize enough, like the distribution, it's not real. It's not an accurate plot of the distribution right now because it is involved in all these little subcultures, and the goal is to say this in some sense is inevitable, right? People are going to search out and find, once they learn about the nature of how their wealth depreciates over time in a fiat system, they're going to search out and find ways to store their money in a way that doesn't destroy its value over time. The argument is that it's just a matter of time. And it makes more sense at this point to see how this is going to, by getting people to adopt it now, how it can actually become a monetary network that will benefit everyone, not just an elite few, which is presently the system we labor under.
Amen. So, Slappy, what are the benefits of why is sound money actually good for society and not evil or not an idol, if you will?
Yeah, so where to start? It is, like you said, cannot be inflated. So when you get paid in Bitcoin, you're able to store that energy, all that stuff you created, and store it efficiently, whereas the dollar being inflated all the time, it loses value over time. So what are we forced to do when we have dollars? You can't hold them. They lose value over time. You get poorer as you hold dollars. So we do things like give them to financial advisors to put into different funds or whatever. And I have a 401k from work. I don't know what I'm invested in. I have no idea. It's dumb money. But I know I can't hold cash. And I know they match, so I get 100% return immediately. So, all right, I'll put it in this mutual fund. I don't know what it is. I'm trusting someone else to do that for me. I have no idea where it goes. With Bitcoin, with sound currency, with a hard money that you can't easily manipulate or create, you can hold that. And as we get more productive as a society, your spending power increases. And we all have stories of our grandparents who worked at a company for 50 years and saved, and they retired comfortably because at least we were on a gold standard. As you know, it wasn't as easy to inflate the currency before 1971, and they were able to store their value over time, and the purchasing power increased. And so what that does is lowers your time preference, because if I'm going to spend my Bitcoin, I better spend it on something I really want or need. Because I'm not going to just buy the latest shoes that cost $150 when I could buy a cheap pair of shoes that do the same thing and have more Bitcoin, because it's going to be worth more in the future. But when my dollars lose value over time, maybe I want to chase those things because the dollars are losing value anyway. The ability of the government to print money and Social Security and Medicaid and send mom to a nursing home. And no offense to anyone whose mother is in a nursing home, but if we have a sound currency, we're going to go back. It's going to happen where we have multiple generations in a household, where we're taking care of each other, where the parents raise the kids and the kids take care of the parents. It's inevitable because we can't just print up $400,000 for a mortgage. So we're going to live leaner. And if you're a Catholic who wants that strong family and that strong society, that mutual aid society that we all rely on each other and we all help each other out when someone's in a bad way, a sound currency is the way to do it. Otherwise, the easy way to do it is to go to your local congressman and beg them and give him money for his campaign and get a bunch of buddies in and get some big corporations to, do whatever they do, however the wheels turn back there in government, and give you a check, which, by the way, is worth less than it was last week. So we could go on. We could do hours on the benefits of what a sound currency would do for society and for Catholics in general, and for our faith. And I think Bitcoin fixes the problems with our current culture. And I've seen it countless times doing a Bitcoin podcast. And we're not shy about saying we're Catholic on there. I mean, it's not a Catholic podcast, it's a Bitcoin podcast. But we talk about our religion. And people have sent us DMs saying I'm going back to church after getting into Bitcoin, because it just makes you think long-term in the kind of society you want to live in. And so I think there's just multiple benefits. You can't even calculate the benefits that are going to come from this. While I do tell people, I don't tell people to go out and buy Bitcoin. I think you should learn about it and understand what it is and understand what sound currency is and a hard money and all these. You have to understand that instead of just dumping all your money in. However, I'm careful to give financial advice on a advisor's podcast, but I do tell the people I care about to at least buy some Bitcoin, because I think it is inevitable that that the capital is going to flow into the hard asset, and it's just going to keep going that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously,
I'll stop there.
I'm a fan of Bitcoin, so I get it. Yeah, I think if you want to learn about Bitcoin and grow in conviction, it's good to own some, because then you have skin in the game. I'm more likely to read the Bitcoin Standard or The Ethics of Money Production by Guido Hulsmann if I own a little bit and I want to learn the story. And so whatever that means, if that means just dipping your toe in while you learn and just buying some to understand how it works, like I totally get that. Father, your thoughts?
From my perspective, I've come to see, I've been taught so much by this deep dive into this world of cryptocurrency. It's forced me to ask questions and to notice things that I've never noticed before. And that's one of the claims about this, is that happens for everyone. If you start digging into this and going, well, okay, what is this? What is money? You start having to notice things that just you take for granted otherwise. And one of those claims for the power of this sound money, hard money, is that, as Slappy's saying, it changes your whole way of thinking, of being. It shifts your priorities. For me, as a priest, I have a particular mandate to be attentive to the needs of the poor. To take El Salvador as an example, something like 15% of the wealth that's being sent from this country to El Salvador is being skimmed off not by governments, but by private companies who are enriching themselves. The richest man in Mexico made his money off of remittances from U.S. workers. That richest man in the world, or richest man in Mexico, bought the New York Times and has incredible influence, right? So we're looking at a system that has deep influences that are unseen. And Bitcoin has brought me to a point where I start to recognize, wow, there's stuff here that I need to pay attention to, and it's exploitative of the poor. Our current monetary system of fiat money excludes the poor. To get 70% of the people in El Salvador don't have a bank account. That means they don't have access to all these great, global economies. I can order something from a business in China and have it shipped to me directly to my door. I can't do that from El Salvador. Nobody can do the kinds of things that we are saying are helpful means to growing wealth and accruing stability, because they don't have access to the system. Sound money fixes this, and we believe that Bitcoin is one of the innovative developments in the history of technology, period, in the history of economy, on the level of what happened in the Venetian merchants of the 13th and 14th centuries. Those are big claims. But to me, when I see the insistence that we have to serve the poor, that doesn't just mean give the poor your Bitcoin. It means give them access to the things that will allow them to build a proper economy in the places where they live. And I see that as a great amount of foresight on the part of their president to do just that.
Excellent. So, Father Blaha, in the pantheon of the toxic Catholic Bitcoin men of the cloth, are you like the starting point guard, or are you the shortstop, or where are you at in that lineup?
I didn't even know it was a team. I feel like this is a one-man game right now. I'm sure there are others. I have no knowledge of any of the brothers who are in any way involved in this, other than the guys I go on vacation with. But among them, I'm the one who's talking about it the most. So maybe.
Yeah. No, maybe. I think we found the guy.
Some good news, Father. In the Philly archdiocese, I know we have a couple.
We need to get together.
Yeah, man.
We start stacking sats, sending some lightning.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool, guys. Well, Father Blaha, how can the listeners learn more about you and what you're doing at Christ the King?
Oh, man, I would love to put it out there. I have a homily podcast they can listen to on Spotify. Just search my name, Father Nick Blaha. Yep. Our Catholic school here is going full on classical. We have a homeschool co-op that we've opened up to part-time students who want to come in and share in beauty of the Catholic liberal arts tradition at our school. That's at ctkclassical.org. We'd love to get the word out about it.
Great. We'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. And then Slappy, can you tell us about the Rollo and Slappy show?
Sure. The Rollo and Slappy show. It's a podcast me and my friend Rollo host. And I was telling Andy, Rollo and I have been friends for a long time. We went to the same high school. We kind of, back in 2008, started getting into Austrian economics, and we're like, man, we got to tell our friends about this. This stuff is so cool. So we started a blog and a podcast, and it just, my friends never caught on the same way we did. So I don't know if that's my problem or theirs, but we kept going and found Bitcoin along the way. And over the last couple of years have totally turned into kind of a Bitcoin podcast. And so check us out there. Find us on Twitter. Rollo is certainly more active than I am, but I do pop my head in on Twitter from time to time. What am I? At Slappy_Jones_.
Yeah. And the way that I found you was through that episode that you did called The Catholic Case for Bitcoin. And did you bring up like the Nicholas O'Rame stuff?
Yeah, that book's great. And it's a short read.
Cool.
And
well, good, guys.
Written a long time ago. The knowledge that guy had.
Right. Yeah. 13th century French bishop or something. And he's writing about how the princes are, what's the word I'm looking for, where you inflate the coins.
Debase the currency.
He's shaving the coins.
Wow.
Well, guys, this has been a good Catholic Bitcoin toxic maximalist show. And thanks for coming on. We should do this again sometime.
I agree. Thank you. It's a pleasure, Andy.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Father.
Take care.